Thank you for the answer.
You're welcome.
You know, I have not been shy about the fact that you're sitting on way too much money relative to running balanced budgets every year. I get the request for a license increase. I get it. I understand it. It can't be justified, in my opinion, when you're sitting on reserves of this capacity. To propose a $2 million cut, which I won't rehash the whole thing, while you're sitting on not just $61 million in uncommitted reserves. That's 120% of your budget, just in uncommitted reserves. And just so everyone is aware, for the public and everybody on the committee, that money can be used at your discretion for any kind of expense you choose. That's thus the term uncommitted.
Correct.
That is in addition to your operating reserves, which are funds retained to ensure sufficient cash on hand to meet cash flow needs when revenues do not cover expenditures. And the committed reserves, again, on top of uncommitted, funds set aside for future contractual obligations, restricted revenues received through legal settlements or other legislative mandates, and revenues collected in advance as part of a multi-year fishing license program. So your entire pool, investment pool, is almost $120 million with a roughly $50 to $55 million. That is more than twice what your actual expenditures are. I mean, I don't think people realize just how much money that the commission is sitting on. And I am a fiscal steward, right? And I believe you need to manage your budgets fiscally and responsibly. So to give it a reference point, just a couple years ago, the legislature passed a bill for local municipalities. They were only allowed to keep 5% of their actual expenditures in reserve. The boroughs and the townships came to us and said, look, for budgeting purposes, for lines of credit, for et cetera, we would like the legislature to increase that to 25%, which the legislature passed. I think that was 2 or 3 years ago. So we have a cap on municipal governments in order to protect the taxpayers and to be good stewards of, in this case, boaters and anglers. There is a cap on what municipal governments can keep in reserve of 25% of their actual expenditures. 25%. You have 120% in uncommitted reserves, 120%, and another 100, almost 100% in other reserve accounts. And to say that you're going to cut $2 million, then cut hatcheries and stocking in certain places, which I won't rehash, when you could easily tap that from your reserve fund, is inexcusable to me. And I think people need to know how much the Fish and Boat Commission is sitting on, that somehow it needs to be addressed in some capacity in this whole huge conversation about a license increase, no license increase. It is an issue that cannot be ignored. Because there is no way, and I went last night and spoke to my Northampton County Federation of Sportsmen's Clubs. I gave them this exact same information. And I'm pretty sure that if 1 or 2 of them knew this information, it was a lot. I don't think people know. And I am not going to go home and justify to my anglers and my outdoorsmen and women that I voted to make you pay more for your license increase while the commission is sitting on this kind of money. It would be completely irresponsible of me to do that. I think it would be irresponsible of this committee and this legislature to do that until this issue is addressed and resolved collectively. And I don't know what the exact answer is, but something's got to be done about it. And that's just my opinion, and I think people need to know. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the chance to share it.
Well, if I can respond to that, since there are a number of issues there that I believe I should be able to explain if I have the time to do it. First of all, our view of fiscal management is different. we protected that reserve because it's our rainy day fund. You better than anybody in the legislature knows rainy day funds. It's going to start raining this year. And this is a reserve, if the legislature doesn't act on a revenue fee increase of some type, it's going to be depleted in 5 years, just based on spending on operating costs. It'll drain down in 5 years. Rainy day funds aren't there to be spent on operating costs. If you read the Penn State Business School's plan, you'll see they call that fund our strategic strength. That's the only strategic strength that we have. This is going to allow us to accommodate changes in our programs over the next 5 years if the legislature doesn't act on a fee increase, where we never be able to accommodate those changes. It'll lower the burden on what we have to take away from the anglers and boaters by continuing to draw out of that reserve. Secondly, I can spend that reserve tomorrow. If you want me to spend a reserve, I'll spend it tomorrow. Just tell the governor you want us to spend our reserve. I'll take care of half of our deferred infrastructure problems. Half of them. That leaves me with my other half to take care of without any money in reserve. So my approach at fiscal management is to be a responsible steward of the anglers' monies, have a plan for the future, not a plan for today, but a plan for the future that recognizes the fact that you may or may not increase license fees. If you don't, then we're going to be in terrible condition tomorrow if we don't have something in reserve to pay the bills.
So, to your point, of course you could spend it all tomorrow. Every government agency could do that. It's like a municipality who needs to work on roads. You could claim you have $6 million in road projects to do, and that might be accurate. And if somebody gave you $6 million to fix every one of them, the next year you'd still have road expenses, right? So I'm sure the agency is no different. You have a wish list, but I'm not aware that this committee knows what the commission's plan is moving forward, what the full priorities are. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. It hasn't been explained to me. Like, here's priority one, here's priority two.
I laid 10 priorities out in my testimony.
Right, and I saw those. I saw those. But, so you're telling me that in having run a fiscally balanced budget as of this year, that in 5 years, $120 million will be gone?
Yes.
Just for operating expenses?
Just because every year it's another $6.2 million need for health care and pensions that accumulates over time, that's going to build, and then inflation and other operating expenses is going to erode the reserve. We've got a fiscal projection chart that we showed at the public meetings. Anglers and boaters saw it. They understand it. I just can't understand why the legislature doesn't understand our fiscal management approach. It just baffles me that we're saving money for the future so that in case the legislature doesn't act, we can secure fishing and boating for the Commonwealth's anglers and boaters, and we're being penalized and punished for that. It's inconceivable to me that we're being criticized for saving money and not spending money, more money.
But is it accurate that 80% of your entire expenditure in your budget is for salaries and benefits?
71%.
Now it's 71%?
Yes.
Okay, because last year it was 80%.
71% this year.
Okay. So 30%, 29%
we have less people working for us.
29% of your entire budget actually goes to hatcheries and stocking and habitat, and that's it. And I also think that's important for people to know. I think anglers have a right to know that.
I agree. And
that much of their money is not going to what they think it's going to. It is not going to hatcheries. It is not going to trout stockings and other stockings. It is not going to restoration. And it is going to salaries, benefits, and pensions.
Well, people grow trout. Our hatcheries have to be staffed to be able to provide the
Well, I get it. And I know that even in the private sector, 50% of the average business is paying their workers. That is the biggest cost driver of any kind of institution. I get it. I understand that. But at the same time, there's a perception out there that all these license increases and fishing licenses and everything else that people are paying are going for fish and going for the experience, and it's not. It's not.
I would disagree that that's the public perception, because the analysis that's been done by recreational economists has shown there's no correlation between the number of licenses any state sells and the number of fish that we stock. No correlation. I've done the same analysis for our programs. If we're down 1 year, sometimes we sell more licenses. If we're up 1 year, sometimes we sell less licenses. There's no relationship between the number of fish stocked and the number of licenses sold. I can provide you with that paper.
That's fine, but I think people who buy fishing licenses think that most of the money that they're contributing toward that license is going for what goes in the streams and the lakes. That's my belief. So, that's all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.